you've already built a property portfolio of 12 properties now, so which is already an amazing achievement. But the big thing that I wanted to talk to you about today, because the whole portfolio is producing around $250,000 revenue per year, but the real kicker was 9 of those properties were purchased over an 8-week period. Like, that's insane. I've got so many questions, but before we get into all of those questions, can you kind of set the stage a little bit more on the property investing side of things? How did it all start for you? Can you talk us through like property number 1?
I picked up a book when I was 21. Okay, it was I was in the Balmain library, the bookstore, the main drag there, and I found a book by Steve McKnight, which talked a lot about wrap loans and what he was doing back then, and there was a very big focus on cash flow, and I thought that was the coolest thing. It's the first time I ever read a financial book, and I saw it as a true north for creating wealth. And it wasn't until 5 or 7 years later that I decided to buy my first property, but I did poorly with the first couple of properties.
So what year did you read the book?
16 years ago now. So, what are we? It would have been 2010-ish.
10-ish? 2008?
Yeah,
okay.
About then. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, just before the GFC.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then you read the book, you got inspired, but it took a little while before you pulled the trigger.
It did. That was largely because of capital. I didn't have a lot of savings back then. It would have been approximately $21,000 in the bank when I read the book. It was in a little Eubank saver, earning probably 5% interest. I thought that was super cool back then. But I didn't really have the capital to move forward, or at least I didn't think I did.
Okay.
So eventually I did pull the trigger about 5 years later and picked up my first property, which had a few mistakes. And the second property had even more mistakes.
Can you talk us through a few of those?
Yeah, the first property just wasn't right because the valuer wasn't backing up the value of the what I thought was a secondary dwelling. It wasn't a secondary dwelling. It was basically a garage conversion. So that didn't work because I couldn't release equity on that. But at least there was some cash flow around that, so it wasn't too bad. But I ended up selling that because I just didn't have the ability to go buy again because I couldn't release equity, and that was a big part of what I wanted to do. Keeping in mind, I didn't have a lot of capital, so all my chips were in that particular go. So the next property was land, and I thought, well, I'll build a property with an internal granny flat or something to that effect. So I looked for cheap land on the Central Coast, and I ended up finding something for about $145,000 in Berkeley Vale. Okay, really, really cheap land. And I thought, well, how can you go wrong? I pretty much bought it unseen. So not the first time last time I did that, but I bought this unseen, and I really didn't know what I was doing with land. I knew I wanted to build on it. I spoke to a couple of builders. They said, sure. They probably wanted the money for what they were going to do, but I ended up buying something and learnt very quickly what flame zone was, which is your highest form of BAL rating, bushfire attack level in New South Wales. I learned about what easements were in watercourses, and I learned how much it costs to clear a lot of trees and what pole home designs are. So needless to say, it was cheap for a reason.
So you're getting expensive education pretty quickly by the sounds of it.
Yeah. There's a lot of mistakes in that one, and I learned a lot real quick. Fortunately for me, I got out of that. I learned how hard it was to work with that land.
Did you build first to get out of it? Or?
No. I got strung out by a builder for about 9 months trying to get a DA approved to build something.
Okay.
And the long story short is I don't think the builder thought they were going to get it out of the ground either. But it ended up delaying a lot of time. I did make a little bit of money out of it. I resold it a year later for $225.
And what year was this roughly?
This would have been about 2015.
2015.
Yeah, it was 2015.
And is this you and a partner? You solo?
Yeah, my wife and I making the decision.
Yeah? Okay. Yeah. All right. So you've got some pretty big lessons then from the beginning. Dwelling that wasn't quite approved or wasn't approved to actually be
what I wanted to be.
What you wanted it to be, and in the valuer's eyes, more importantly there. Then you learnt some pretty painful lessons around bushfire ratings, stumping, clearing, all this kind of stuff on the land side of things. Yeah. So I'm assuming then, I mean, technically we're going to property number 3, but it kind of feels like really it's starting the portfolio again because both of these were sold, weren't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Can you talk us through 3 then?
Yeah, so 3 was a 2-bedroom villa in a complex of about 10 in a suburb called Toukley, which is where I grew up. Okay. So it was local, it was familiar.
And for anyone that doesn't know Toukley, can you describe it?
Yeah, so Toukley is in the northern part of the Central Coast. It's directly between Sydney and Newcastle. This is a suburb where you have a CBD that's inside Toukley. There's not a lot of CBDs around on the Central Coast, but that's one of the bigger ones. You've got Longjetty, Terrigal, Toukley being one of those, and This property was purchased for about $345,000, and at the time would rent for about $350,000. So it's sitting at a pretty close to a 5.2% yield.
Yeah. Okay. And why this one?
This one was very safe compared to all the mistakes I'd made. And I had a concept that was largely built out of doing a mapping session with Nathan Birch at Be Invested back in the day. And it talked about foundation portfolios, right? And building
bread and butter properties.
Bread and butter properties so that you can go build a few of them and then you can do the fancy stuff later. That was generally the concept. So whether you want to develop or do other things, get some equity behind you, get some foundational properties, and then you can take that next step. And I think that's what I got wrong in the past with taking on especially the land. So that's why I was attracted to this particular investment.
Okay. And so did you end up using Birchie to buy those, or you just ended up?
No, for that one, no. I did use him to buy one up in Queensland, in Carrara, which was the next property. And I used him for that one because I wanted to see what the workings on the inside for a successful buying agency look like on paper, see how they broke down the deal, and see what I could learn out of that. So while I could have probably gone and bought a property by myself, bought a few, I really wanted the IP. I wanted the knowledge on how they went and judged a good deal. So
you kind of like, I want the service, but I almost want a course wrapped in the service kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And did it work?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
I got a spreadsheet that analyzed the deal. They used comparable sales. They analyzed every outgoing. They compared that to the ingoings.
Yep.
They looked at the rate and they said, well, this is either a positive cash flow property, neutral or negative, and this is the numbers on paper. And that really gave me the foundation for the spreadsheet that I gave you, just analyzing the portfolio, of having a look at all the numbers and assessing the property based on that. And there was a question I asked coming back to why they chose that property. And then I thought as well on top of that, why is no one actually looking at it? Right?
So it had been on the market for a while?
I don't even remember, to be honest. I probably 30 days, 40 days, like a normal amount of time for a property.
And what was the answer to why no one was looking at it?
Because they wanted to look at the spreadsheet. They wanted to look at the numbers to justify the deal. And they felt that when they looked at a deal, this was coming from Nath back then, that looking at the deal can complicate the perspective of the deal. And that if the numbers are strong, that is where the credible evidence is, not how we feel about it when we go and look at it.
So when you say looking at the deal, you're talking about physically looking at the property. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Like physically looking at the property on site, inspecting it, kicking the tires, so to speak.
Yep. Okay. Whereas he's going, don't worry about any of that. If the figures add up, that's what matters.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So,
and that obviously sat right with you. You were comfortable with that?
Yeah. Like I backed in the service at the time. That was the knowledge I was given, so I backed it in. It was a property that was pretty slow going on the Gold Coast because that was purchased back in 2015. And so there was not a lot of action for the first few years, incremental increases in rent, but not a lot. Of course, Commonwealth Games happened. Then we've got the Olympic Games around the corner. Totally different ball game now for that property. That was purchased for about $269,000 plus a roughly $10,000 buyer's agent fee. It's worth now $550,000 roughly, and is rented for, I believe, about $600 a week.
Yeah, right. So what's that, like a 13% yield now?
Totally different,
something like
right?
that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So by this stage, then you're at technically the portfolio's at property number one, but you've got the experience of three properties. Oh no, sorry, two properties now.
Yeah.
That's where the portfolio is at. So the experience of 4 purchases, and now you're starting to get a little bit more confident of like, I'm getting this now.
Yeah. It was very much of let's replicate success around this, right? So it's just copy paste. How do we actually build the portfolio to replace our income with more decisions like this?
And that was the goal, to just replace your income.
Absolutely. So we kind of built backwards of reading books like Robert Kiyosaki's Retire Young, Retire Rich. It's one of the books I liked from him. And the idea and thinking we had is let's go and get these investments to replace our income one day so we can, live financially free. And we wanted to use property as that vehicle for it. Buying one of these is great, and we could see that incremental income replacement, but how many did we actually need to get? And that was where we wanted to copy and replicate the success of Carrara.
And what was the number?
The number for me personally, well, we want to get to 40 properties. That's our goal.
40 properties.
That's debt-free. roughly $20,000 income per property. But I also understand as soon as I start throwing numbers out, by the time that we actually get there, those numbers are completely different, right?
Yeah.
Interest rates go up, interest rates go down, rent goes up. Generally speaking, by the time you pay the tax man, by the time you actually pay out the outgoings, at the moment, 40 properties is a very palatable number for us to be working towards.
So passive income goals around $800K a year. Is that about right?
Yeah, it'd be something like that. Like that, we're talking rich life thinking, right? We're talking about, what's something we can really aim for that's going to create a lifestyle that is very interesting. Okay, it doesn't cost that much to be us, but what we're thinking, my wife and I, when we talk about these things, what's an interesting number?
Okay. Can you just describe them? What is an interesting lifestyle? Because that is a big number. Most people have got I want 100K passive, 200K passive, not 800K passive.
I know that right now we've what it costs to be us, we could easily, live off 300,000 after tax and, as a combined income. That no issue. But when I start to go, my wife's from the US and we want to connect with that family a lot. We want to have a lot of experiences on the road, a lot of holidays. We start to think big. And I think coming back to, what you were picking on a bit earlier is like, I like to jump in. I like to go a little bit harder. I think that's where we're playing with these numbers and go, well, what's that look like when it comes to aiming for numbers that are going to mean that you're financially free, not just financially free on a base existence, but something that's going to make it really spicy, something interesting to go and play with.
Yeah, something that if we want to go to the States and fly business class, we're not looking, can we do it? It's let's go do it.
Yeah, and it doesn't scare me to think about those numbers. Yeah. Like, I think sometimes in the community we dial it down a bit. Go, well, that's too big to dream of. Like, I don't know. I like to play around with it. Like, let's see how far we can stretch it. Let's see how far we can go.
We're speaking about how far you can go. Can we get to the property, I suppose, that was before the rapid acceleration? Because I want to talk about that little gap between, all right, I purchased, I think it was, what was it then? Property rental number 3?
Number 3. Yep.
And then what, there was a waiting period for a while?
There was, because of the Royal Commission and the lending practices started to make it a little tricky, right? It was tougher to get borrowings. And for me, I didn't have I've never had a lot of cash in the bank. And when I say a lot of cash, let's talk more than 50 grand, right? So it's the first property, I think I had $27,000 in the bank. Second property would have been sub 50,000. So a lot of the growth has been from equity release. Okay, that's how I've done a lot of my purchases. So when we were looking at that property number, I guess it was 4 then, it was going to be tough because the servicing was getting tighter. The banks were introducing a lot of different constraints to protect the community on lending. So it was 2020 when I was really going, I was on a campsite somewhere and I was like, I'm sick. I haven't bought a property for ages. I've been a real estate agent now for 4 years, right? Because I got into that because I was passionate about buying property. I wanted to see more deals. And here I was, it had been a couple of years and I was getting really itchy. So I called up the bank and I said, what can we do? How can I buy a property?
Not a broker, the bank?
The bank direct.
Okay.
Yep. I ended up calling the bank direct and built a pretty good relationship there with someone in the commercial lending path team.
And this is through being an agent that you built the relationship?
No, it was just from having a contact because of the existing loans I had. I was at the Commonwealth Bank, so just one of the big 4. And I called him up and said, how do I do it? How do we make this happen? And I think there was a lot of people in 2020 that weren't asking those questions, and the bank was pretty keen to make things happen. Now,
obviously, a lot happened in 2020. Yeah. Are we talking early 2020 before everything got crazy? Are we talking mid 2020 when everyone knew what was happening? Like when in 2020 was this?
I was on a campsite because I couldn't be at my property, right?
Gotcha. Okay.
So which explains which timeline that was. So COVID had hit. We were in a place where we bought a dual fold camper because we were renovating a house and we weren't allowed to live on the lot. So we went and lived on a campsite for a bit. So, we're digressing a bit there. But the point was, I remember standing there and having itchy feet going, I want to buy an investment property. And yet COVID had hit and I still wanted to do something, right? I was passionate about it. And I was getting sick of not buying a property. So I called up the bank. I said, how do we get lending? How do we do it? And there was deals around, right? I was seeing that, as an agent, I was only seeing a few people, rock up to properties. So I was thinking that investors are pretty much checked out right now. You couldn't get into Queensland. right? The border was closed. So I started thinking, I'm going, geez, the whole Warren Buffett-ism of,
fearful when others agree when others are
there's
fearful.
a lot of fear getting around.
Absolutely.
So I started to think that, there's probably a good opportunity up in Queensland to go buy another one of these properties. So I called up, I got lending, and there was a property that I couldn't go see. So I jumped in. It was $145,000.
Okay, is this like a townhouse or a unit?
154, I think this one was. This is a townhouse, so it was on ground level. There was about 25 properties in the complex. This one was in Mount Warren Park, and it was purchased, for about the 154. I remember struggling to get the loan. I ended up going with Macquarie Bank for this one.
Okay.
Right, and I struggled to get it because they didn't lend money against properties that were that cheap. Right.
Okay.
So that was one of their policies. So I had to get it, looked at, and eventually they came on board and gave me the lending to do it.
And what kind of LVI are you using? 90/10?
On that one there, I pulled a bit of equity out. I did contribute 10% deposit to that particular purchase, so about $15,000.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and so I did use LMI on that particular deal.
So first properties. As this rapid acceleration is really happening. And that's what I want to keep referring to it, is because it's still nuts, man.
Yeah.
That's a unit.
Yeah.
Low cost.
Low cost.
During all of the madness.
During the madness.
You're using a 10% deposit. You're going straight to the bank. You're not using a broker, which I'm already feeling is going to be one of the answers to my question that I'm going to ask now, is if you can talk us through the details of financing, because I remember getting financing around then.
Yep.
And I remember getting a pre-approval that would take 3 months, 4 months just to get pre-approved. Like it was nuts. Actually, given that was later 2020, not when you were buying. It's probably later 2020, early 2021 when everything did start to pick up.
Yeah.
How the hell are you getting finance together?
30 days it took.
But 30 days, but 9 properties, 8 weeks. Are you getting one giant pre-approval? Are you getting like lots of little ones?
So the difference for me after that purchase is I circled back to Macquarie Bank, and I had taken out a small business loan. Okay. And so I was considered as a commercial customer. And so it was a different lending path. They could, I don't know what that means on the back end from a lending perspective, but they had a different lending path when you were a commercial customer. So I had a different team at the Commonwealth Bank that would assess it. Yep. And it seemed pretty fast. I was getting loans approved within 48 hours at the time. And I think that was because there was a real push on supporting business during that that kind of COVID emergence time.
Yep.
And there was a fair bit of liquidity getting around.
Yeah, okay. Because everyone was just wanting to keep everything afloat. Yeah.
I really feel like that was a factor. I can't quantify that for you and tell you why, but it felt like the loans were coming pretty quick and fast. They were approved individually. I remember asking, could I get a couple approved at the same time? They said no. Show us the deal, and we'll get it done. And so I was coming back to the bank, going, look, I want to get approved for another one. He said, yep, just go get another deal, and we'll get it done.
So you're showing deal by deal. Approvals are all separate.
Yep.
But they're going through this commercial channel.
Yep.
Directly through the bank.
Yep.
Deposits, is that equity releases each time? Because I'm looking at this going, you don't even have time to settle on number 3 and you're buying number 4.
The last time I paid a deposit on a property was 10 properties ago, which is that one that I did with Macquarie Bank, and it was $15,000.
You have to walk us through that. How does that work?
Okay. So I mentioned that I was renovating my house.
Yep.
Okay. I put everything I had into that. All right. So I put all my equity money that I had in the savings into that. And the idea I had is once my wife was happy and the family was happy and we had that, as I was going to release the equity and then use it to buy investments.
Okay.
So when I went back to the bank and said, all right, can you look at this, look at how much equity is and see if I can do a release? Okay. He said yes. We released the money and we had enough to pretty much run the course of the best part of 10 properties.
Okay. So you've got like $1 million released or something along those lines?
Yeah. Well, it was, keep in mind that the portion that's getting released is the representation of the deposit, right, which is roughly 20%.
And this was actually released? It wasn't a cross-collateralization?
It was still that particular property, which was the PPOR.
Yep.
Okay, so my primary place of residence was a security. Okay, so
so
they still have that down as a security on those properties.
Okay.
I could get that released and changed now because the equity
I was
position
going to
changed.
say you'd be fine to do it now.
Yeah, easy. But we've that was the security, and that was covering the 20% deposit. So no LMI required. So it was more around let's say $250,000 release of equity.
We've already mentioned one Buffettism on the show. You and I were talking about a few off air. There's one that comes to mind now, which is don't risk what you've already got to get what you don't need.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever feel like you were rolling the dice on the family home?
Yeah.
And why'd you do it?
I was determined to go down this path, and I was confident that the strategy I was doing, which in light of rates were expected to change soon too. Okay. A lot of this was done early 2022. Okay. So the 9 properties in 8 weeks was across February, March of 2022.
Oh, okay. You got to fast forward from there. I thought what you were describing then was early 2020.
Early 2020 was the 4th property, which was a Macquarie Bank finance property. That one was there, but the properties in 2022 were across February, March, and that was the 9 in 8 weeks.
Right. So for anyone listening going, oh, well, he just got in before the boom, that's not how it worked.
Yeah, okay.
Right, okay.
The majority of the boom happened after that particular period.
Okay.
And so what happened is we had this great property that we bought, 154, and it was worth about 200 at the time that I was making this decision, okay?
Okay.
And I was looking at that going, great. It's another good example of what we had done in Carrara. The rent's now increased a bit. It was a 154 purchase that was rented at 250 at the time. It was sitting at about 300 now. So
Okay.
we're really happy, right? Like there's good cash flow on this property. It's not neutral. We're in a positive cash flow property.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to replicate that. In early 2022, I went down that path of getting the finance released because I knew how much that I'd put into the property. And that's where the bank was saying, yep, let's go for it. And I was confident enough in the strategy that I was doing that it would be okay. Even though I was using my primary place of residence, it was either I don't do the renovation and I go and invest in property and then I wouldn't have a very happy wife, or I go down the path of doing the renovation, release the equity, and I get to have my cake and eat it too. And so that's kind of was my attitude on it. And I felt that the safety factor was the cash flow. If the cash flow was off, you're right, I'd have no confidence. If we were talking about negatively geared properties doing the same thing, I would be out. No way. We knew that the RBA was going to lift rates that year. We had a federal election that was coming up in April or May. So it was all set that was going to happen. I do also think that that's why there was a couple less investors at the time that were looking around for those properties. I
know your yield's very healthy now. What kind of average yield on purchase are we talking though? Because you're confident in the cash flow. We're talking what, 5%, 6%, 7%?
Yeah, we're talking about 6% was pretty 6%. Average. So the typical purchase was $200,000 renting for an advertised amount of $250, and I use that word advertised amount $250. When I was looking at the advertisements, I knew that there was increased rent in the local market. Okay? I knew that was happening. I knew that from feedback from property management. I knew that from looking at how low the vacancy rates were in that particular market segment, which is just north of the Gold Coast. So we're talking specifically now Beenleigh, Mount Warren Park, as far as Waterford West. So I backed that the rent was going to increase if the rates went up, okay? Because something that I've seen in the past is that if rates go up, there's usually less purchases. There's more renters because we, for servicing or whatever other reasons, there's more demand on the renting side of it. So I backed that should have a balance. And that's the gauntlet I ran.
But even if you were wrong, the yields were still healthy enough that you didn't feel you were gambling the family home the same way. Because you're still sitting at like a 6%. You're not buying these things at 3% yields.
Correct. Very different story. And there is balance on that. But if you told me that, look, don't expect the rents to go up and interest rates to go up and then still be comfortable, I'd probably tell you I wouldn't be. So I did really want to see those rents go up. But I didn't know that for sure. That's 100% true.
And this really feels like seizing the opportunity is kind of the name of the game. Like there was this TikTok that I watched recently.
Yeah.
I don't even know if it's true, but it's a nice little fable. Apparently Bill Gates is getting interviewed by this reporter. And she says, what's the one thing, or if you can define the reason for your success in one word, what is it? And apparently he doesn't answer the question. He pulls a checkbook out, he writes her name on it, and he gives it to her, and he says, write whatever figure you want on it. And she's like, oh, no, I don't think you understand. She asked the question again. He's like, I'm serious. Write whatever amount that you need on that, and I'll sign it. She's like, oh, no, I couldn't do that. And so he takes the check off her, rips it up, and he says, you could have been the richest news anchor in the world. You just had the opportunity for that. You didn't take it. You threw it away. You want to know why I'm so successful? When I see an opportunity, I pounce on it. Mm. And I liked it. It's a bit of a dick move. Like,
yeah, it's fair.
But there's something in that. And I feel like there was this opportunity that you saw. It would have been so easy to maybe buy one, buy none, buy two. But what gave you the confidence to just be like, I'm absolutely pulling this trigger. I'm backing it.
Just the numbers. I did feel like an alien at the time, and there were people around me saying no.
Okay.
Plenty. And smart people, like people that were mentors at the time that were far more advanced in their investment journey. And really what felt right for me after the mistakes I'd made in the past, after the couple of case studies I had, and also why I was buying them. Okay, I'm buying them not for now. I'm not buying them for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. I'm buying them for my retirement date, whatever that is. Mm-hmm. And so for me, they didn't need to be right decisions right now. They needed to be right decisions for about 10 to 15 years from now. And that made more sense to me in regards to the cash flow was enough to pay them down. They're in markets that are low risk because obviously with Brisbane and Gold Coast, very diversified industries. Mm-hmm. So from that perspective, I felt like it was a safe enough option to park what's precious, which was pretty much everything we had, and move forward with not just buying 1, 2, or 3, but buying 9.
Okay, so because you were looking so long term, because you felt things were healthy yield wise, all the numbers stacked up.
Yeah,
I still don't feel if that's like a pull the trigger on the opportunity, but I guess if that's how it felt, that's how it felt.
So yeah, so
like why not just buy 2?
Because it wasn't going to suit that number that we talked about before. Okay. So like if I was going to buy 2, the problem is how quickly are we going to get to those big numbers that we're discussing in regards to being financially free? So I'm working backwards with what I want long term, which is to be able to do some fun things and to have a very not just a modest life in retirement, but a life that kind of allows you to really explore and do some things. And so that's why I was working backwards from that.
So the push for pouncing on the opportunity really came from wanting to achieve the goal, but knowing that if you didn't pounce on the opportunity, then you're not going to achieve the goal.
Yeah, like you're just not going to, like working backwards from that, you're going to have to go big. Have to. So probably we could have pounced on the goal and done it conservatively and bought 2 or 3, but we had the green light to do 9. The 10th one I was knocked back on. Like I think things were starting to get a little bit close to the election by that time because it was across February, March, and I think the election was April, May, and that's when the banks started to get a little bit tighter. They didn't say that, no, your servicing is completely locked out. It was more a conversation of, look, the dynamics changing out there. Right now. We're starting to talk about these rates that are going to rise and things are going to change. So they were starting to change their policies and probably changing their assessment rates. And that's why I didn't get 10. Yeah.
So if having the focus on the goal, the drive towards the goal is really the big push to take action on opportunity when they arise. Can you talk to me a little bit about, I suppose, what you think is really important when it comes to goal setting? You mentioned a mentor before.
Yeah. So I've had a couple of mentors, and some of them I haven't met, right? But the big guys that I've always listened to was Steve McKnight was my first.
Yep.
Next was Robert Kiyosaki, and then was Grant Cardone. They're the big ones. While I've had some more local kind of mentors, which have been previous real estate agents that have, been investing over time, and they've got different ideas. Some are interested in commercial property, some are interested in development. It really comes down to their skill set and what they like. Those 3 names that I mentioned, Robert Kiyosaki, Grant Cardone, and Steve McKnight, they've been probably the biggest influence. Nathan Birch as well, he deserves a mention because a lot of this has been the formula that he put in front of me many, many, many moons ago.
Sounds like kind of kicked it off in a way.
Yeah, well, I remember someone hitting me between the eyes. This guy named Daniel that worked alongside him.
I remember Daniel.
Yeah. Ran into him a few weeks ago randomly, like 15 years old, 10 years later. But
yeah, right.
Yeah, same golf club. I've got to give him a call. But he won't remember this, but he hit me between the eyes and said, your strategy won't work, or it hasn't worked from anyone that he's seen at the time. I was just like, whoa, cold. And that was because I owned that property with the secondary dwelling, or thought it was. So he just said, look, that's a strategy that I haven't seen work. And so I was like, okay, ouch. So I really learned a lot from those guys back then. But the biggest thing as to why I had confidence to go as hard as I did was the cash flow conversation. I really feel like cash flow is your friend when you're got good times.
Yep.
But it really saves your ass when times are tough. Right? Like it's
like even now with rates where they are, you're negative, but you're not negative nowhere near as much as some people would be out there.
Yeah. So I don't mind saying, I'm negative 50,000, which is fine. That's palatable for me.
For a portfolio of 12 rentals, that's pretty good.
Yeah. Keep in mind that the last time that I put money into that portfolio was 15,000 in 2020, whatever it was, right? For one of those properties. So the only things that I've paid from my cash since then has been conveyancer fees and has been pest and building reports.
So we're probably talking about what, 10 grand, 12 grand, something like that?
Yeah.
Actually, no, it'd be more than that, but still, we're talking not very much.
Yeah. So if you want to include that deposit across the last 10 properties, I've spent $25,000 of my own money.
Okay. So as far as the goal setting's concerned, the mentors around you, they're not all people that are actually like you're meeting up with them once a week. These are more so people that are in your life through reading books, podcasts, maybe doing like Daniel, if you did the map session with him, things like that.
Yeah.
But that's giving you the clarity to put together a goal because of some harsh truths that are like, hey man, this isn't going to work.
Yeah.
This is what you need, that kind of thing.
You know what one of the hardest truths was out of all of that, because I've been studying investing for 16 years now, very closely. Fascinating. I've always just thought the idea of not having to work is a pretty cool concept, right? I think we all do. Financial freedom. The biggest thing that hit me between the eyes is when Grant Cardone talks about income and the requirement of that capital, that leverage. Yeah. He references in a book called Millionaire's Booklet. He believes that an individual needs to be earning $300,000 a year. That's $100,000 for your lifestyle, $100,000 for the tax man, and then $100,000 to invest. Okay. And when he said that, I had a bit of an aha moment on that. It's like, yeah, you're kind of right. Like if you're going to hit millionaire numbers, which is what he's referencing, right? He's not talking about like conservative means, but if you're going to really accelerate, income does matter. And whether you take a page out of that book and you say dial it back or forwards, it still, I think, is an important thing to go, you still do need to go and upskill and have that supplement of income, especially in 2024 when servicing is getting so much harder. Like, how are you going to actually back up that servicing to go get access to the debt? Because that's one of the challenges investors have now, right?
Well, I guess one of the bonuses you've got with the career path as well, being an agent, it's not like you're just setting this, here you go, you've got 80 grand a year, 150 grand a year. Yeah. If you want to kill it, you've got opportunity to get better and to increase your income. Yeah, for sure. And one of the big things that I do push on is growing my team and scaling that part of the business, which is one of the biggest motivations for me in my real estate career has been to feed into the property portfolio. Okay, like that. That is something I've recognized is a very, very important tool, is that the more that we can go and scale up the team and scale up the income on the books, the more the bank can go and lend and service in order to go and buy more properties. So and you might disagree with this, but I feel that you're quite a rare breed being an agent and an investor. I know when I got into the agency world, I just assumed they'd all be investors and all love it. Yeah. And it was like exactly the opposite.
I did too. And I thought that.
So with that in mind, being able to actually wear an agent hat, and now for 8 years or so?
Yeah, 10 years now.
10 years. Okay, so wear it quite firmly. And the investor hat. What are a few tips that you could give anyone listening that you feel give you an edge as an investor because of your experience as an agent?
Yeah, I think the number one, it's funny, now that I'm 10 years in, being an agent. There's not a lot about being an agent that's going to help you with being a better investor. I think you can understand values in a market segment.
Yep.
You might get some experience through others, but I've got enough reason now, after seeing enough successful agents that haven't necessarily been successful with investing, to believe that they're not necessarily always coexist. So the one thing, though, that I believe that an agent does have a good skill at, and that would be worthwhile for anybody that wants to learn about it, and it's very easy to go learn about it, is how to go and appraise properties. Okay, and what I mean by that is looking at comparable sales, identifying what fair market value is for a property. And one of the lessons I did get from, I guess, that course when I used a buyer's agent, used Nathan, is that I looked at the comparable sales, and their argument or their compelling conversation around buying this investment was that you're buying it below market value. So
not asking price, actual sales figures.
Yeah, because they wanted to build equity into each purchase, right? So something that I did, and I have got this from being an agent, is I would go and have a look at every sale that happened in that particular complex that's been advertised on realestate.com. I do have access to RP data across the country, so that's helpful to look at a complex specifically and look at all the sales over the last 10 years. And I always found that a little insightful because I could see where the complex has been and where it's come from and other complexes around it, and then benchmark my purchase, not just over the recent comparable sales in the area, but over the comparable sales over the last decade. Now, I don't know if that's going to be value for everybody, but I always found that a little interesting to kind of look at what people have paid for in different market cycles for that particular complex.
So you're going pretty deep on the comparative, like CMAs, essentially.
Yep.
And as far as a skill set for anyone to really be able to pick up, I feel like there's, and again, we were talking about the Dunning-Kruger effect off air before. I don't feel like it's a skill that's going to take months to master.
No.
I feel like you could probably teach someone how to do a good CMA or good research within a few hours, really.
Teach people it all the time when I go and appraise their properties. I'm going to tell them how I've appraised it so that they can keep an eye on the market for themselves as well. Realestate.com is a fantastic tool for having a look at comparable sales and getting a good understanding of what fair market value is for a property. You can go down the path of being very technical about it, but I find that actually simplifying that is really important. Try to find anywhere between 3 to 10 properties in a particular market segment and benchmark the deal against that. I think that's a great way to go.
It was the only thing I actually personally really liked about Price Finder. I don't know if you've ever used that one.
I have once. Yeah.
We used it in the office for a few months, but there was this really cool feature where you could actually go through all your comp sales and actually rate it if it was comparable, slightly less, slightly better, a lot, and it would actually give you this rating overall at the end.
Oh yeah,
and that was actually quite a cool feature. Yeah. But yeah, otherwise, anyway, I digress.
I think it's important to benchmark though, right? So whichever way you're going to go about it, let's create a list of properties that are similar to the one you're thinking about buying, and how well are you doing? Now, when I purchased, I never needed to be the best deal out of the last 10 deals, the last 3 deals, but I wanted to know that I'm either buying it at fair market value or slightly less, never over.
Well, what are a few things now with the benefit of hindsight that you'd look at and go, okay, I did it quick. Obviously I did it well, but I could have done it better.
Could have done it better? Time. I've been doing this for a while now, and it seems the more that time goes by, it benefits you investing. I think there's 3 things, right, that I look back. I think I got this from Steve McKnight, but he talks about like a triangle, and he breaks it up into 3 pieces, and he goes skill, leverage, and time.
Sounds like something Steve would say.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So I look at it and I go, okay, well, if I had have started buying these style of properties, which was a foundation portfolio and fairly conservative, there would be an extra 5 years of time on my side, which would be nice to have. I'm fortunate. I've started fairly early, so I'm happy with where things are given time. But I just think that often we don't look at that enough. Time is so important. The best time to start is now. Get into something. If there would be quite a few people out there that have the level of equity to go and release and do something that probably have that paralysis by analysis. Get off the fence. Get something, get going with it. And if you're not sure, maybe just make it more conservative. like Steve does talk about, I guess if you've got low skill, then make sure you've got more time or more capital. I think that's kind of how this, Yep. So, so I would say that go and keep that in mind and leverage what time you've got. Make sure you understand what level of skill you have. Don't buy a block of land that's a pole home design with an easement, bell rating of flame zone and massive issues. Go buy something conservative, but get into it quicker and learn on the run with it, because time is such a powerful tool.
I'm all for using BAs or doing it yourself. I think it's a very situational thing.
Yeah.
But I'd even say, like, if you're that time poor and you don't have the time to upskill,
great idea.
Like, get someone that does.
Great idea. I really believe that if you want to shortcut your skill and shortcut your time, then go pay for it. All right, go get a BA.
So what I'm hearing then is benefit of hindsight of what you would have done different is you would have done it earlier.
Yeah, I would have done it earlier. But here's the thing: I didn't realize I could have done it earlier.
Could you have though?
I could have. I could have done some of these things earlier. Some of it was bad decision making. But when I picked up that book when I was 21, I had that bit of money. I could have bought back then. But what was scary for me back then is it would have required every dollar that I had to get into the first deal.
Did you have the level head though? Like, because I've got a similar story, but I was just too busy chasing women and drinking and just making lots of fun, bad decisions.
Oh, you probably had better skills than I had. I was pretty interested in it. I was really interested when I was 21 in investing in property, but I think that I thought that I couldn't afford to do it.
Okay.
And I think that's something that if I do reflect, and when I was on that campsite, the reason why I hadn't picked up that phone and made that call then is I thought I couldn't do it. And when I did pick up the phone, I remember I was calling, I'm going, I've got no chance of getting lending. I haven't got enough money at the moment. I've got some equity. How's this going to, and I remember last time it took me 30 days to get the finance off a lender that was looking at me sideways going, I don't know if we're going to lend the money to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was my previous experience. It was tough to get lending. And I'm sure a lot of people have had that experience. It's tough to get lending. So when I picked up the phone, I thought I was going to get rejected.
Okay.
9 properties later, right? Like I thought I was going to get rejected on the first one and that I wasn't going to get a win. And it ended up being this thing where I ended up buying 9 properties real quick. So it just goes to show you I didn't know.
You thought you couldn't do it when you were 21. You picked up the phone again. I don't know what the gap was there.
27 or something like that. Yeah, had a crack.
Okay.
Yep.
And you still thought you couldn't do it, but at least you gave it a go.
Gave it a go. Picked up the phone, said, how do we do this? That was to the bank direct. And they said, yeah, sure, we can do this. And I'm like, great, get some equity out. And I didn't even know that they would lend me 100% of the money back then. I didn't, because I just thought you couldn't do that. Surely you've got to have some kind of deposit, right?
We're getting to the pointy end of things, and I feel like I've probably just got an answer to the question that I'm about to ask you is, what are the main things people really need to line up if they want to try and grow so rapidly the way that you did? And I kind of feel like the answer is probably going to be just pull the trigger, like do everything you can. Don't have self-limiting beliefs. But what would you say if someone sat down with you right now and said, like, Clint, I want to do it?
Yeah, well, I think that everyone's going to be different, right, because their financial position. I think that in Australia, we really value our home, okay, the place we live.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of people out there that have probably poured a lot of their hard-earned into their home. While I'm not saying everyone go and do risk like I did risk, right? But I am saying that there is a lot of equity in there, and maybe there is something that you're sitting on that you could go leverage, and you could go do part of what I've done. And I think there's a lot of people out there that think they can't do that, or it's too risky, or it's too inaccessible. And that's where the probably difference is, once upon a time, I picked up the phone. I said, how do I do it? And they said, well, you've got the equity there. We can go and do it.
Okay. So really just taking action. That's the big thing that I'm getting.
Yeah. I didn't know I could do it. Didn't know I could do it. Like there was I was frustrated because I hadn't bought a property in a while. And for me, I had the big goals.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at that point in time, there'd been 2 years where I hadn't purchased something, or 2 years, because I bought one in 2020 and then there was 2022, right? So I was here. I was a bit frustrated that I haven't been able to purchase. So I picked up the phone expecting that it was going to be a no. Ended up being yes, 9 properties later.
So I knew loosely your story, but there was purposely parts of details I didn't want to know because I like kind of pulling this kind of stuff apart like real time. I was kind of expecting you to be like, oh yeah, my income was really cool, or maybe there was inheritance or something like that. But there was none of that. Obviously, you had a reasonable income because they don't lend money to you if you're earning 30 grand a year.
Sure,
I know that one firsthand. But really, it sounds like this is all coming about from the renovation of the PPR.
Yep.
Building equity in that.
Yep.
Taking the risk to go, okay, I am going to cross securitize this. I'm going to roll the dice, but I'm taking a calculated risk because the yields are good. I feel like they're going to get even better. And then you've got a connection at the bank through a commercial pathway to be able to just go bang, 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 bang. As far as approvals are concerned, that sounds like that's a huge piece of the puzzle there as well.
I think that just was a time factor, right? So like, I don't think that's inaccessible for people. It just means that I had a different team at the bank that probably had a little less work on.
Okay.
Therefore, we're a little bit more accessible and could punch them out a bit quicker.
Let's face it, even if someone does this in quadruple the time, it's still amazingly impressive. Yeah. So, but if you've got all of this lined up, I'm hearing what you're saying now about if you've got the equity in your home, which so many people would. I remember even before the boom, I would sit down with people when I was an agent and they'd be like, oh, I know I overpaid for this one. I bought it for $86,000 back in 1984. I really should have paid $80,000. And you're sitting in $1 million home going, who cares? And there's no mortgage on it. It's freehold, but they don't ever utilize that. And while someone might not want to go maybe to the extreme that you did, maybe take the pace that you did, what I'm really hearing out of this is the big takeaway. I think everyone that's got a PPR that's maybe had it for 5, 10, however many years is check your equity position. Yeah. Maybe you're sitting on a bigger opportunity than you realize.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. I always, as an agent, when I'm selling properties more so, I'll tell people, look, when you wake up 3 months from now and you're living in the property, sipping on your coffee in the morning, you're not going to think that you've spent $20,000 too much, right?
Yeah.
Which is a good line for an agent to use if you're trying to sell to a buyer.
Yeah.
But really, I kind of use that for myself here, where I was buying these properties at fair market value. I remember that I would just ask the agents, what's needs to be on the paper? Like, can we get it done at 200? No, it needs to be 205. Okay, cool. Make them happy. Let's do it. Let's move on. I really believed in the intrinsic value of what I was buying. Mm-hmm. Like, I saw more value in these deals than what was being advertised or what was being asked for. Really believed that. And I believed that because of the rent that was to come. I saw that the advertised rent was still fine, 6%, right? It wasn't bad. But I really believed that we could stretch that a bit. And I really believed that the market that was going to come with rising interest rates, that rent would increase, which would soften the blow of any increased costs as an investor. And that was fairly well mitigated. Still negatively geared, but keep in mind that if I had have done 20% deposits, this would be all positive cash flow, but it's all equity.
And really, if you wanted to, not that you would, but it sounds like you could probably sell off 2 or 3 and go back to neutral or positively geared now.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. The only reason I won't do that is because that goes against the long-term portfolio. Yeah, exactly. So it's all about working backwards from that goal. These are paying themselves off right now because they're all on P&I as well. So when I say it's $50,000 negative geared, that factors in principal as well.
So you'd be more neutral than if you were interest only.
Yeah, okay. Correct. But I want these to be paid off.
Yep.
So principal and interest is just fine.
Mm. So what's an action step? Anyone that's listening, go on, this is amazing. What's something they can put into action right now?
The amount of people that I see have a good financial position, but a lot of the equity is in their home. I think it's worthwhile going and having a chat and saying, could I go and actually pull out 100% lending on a good cash flow positive property? I would never recommend doing that for negatively geared property. I'd never recommend doing that for commercial or anything that's a little bit off to the side. These properties are villas and townhouses on ground level. They were bought at prices that I felt were very easy to ascertain because when there's other units selling in a complex, it's easy to price them. Mm-hmm. I feel like go and find out whether you can do it. Like if you want to invest in property and you're thinking, well, we just need to go and save up a certain amount of cash and another holiday comes up or another kid needs another soccer shirt or something, you're never going to get there, right? Go and actually ask, can you get the equity out? Can you put it into a property? I just think that it's a missed opportunity, particularly in Australia, particularly because we put so much money into our primary place of residence, our home. Get it out, get into a property, but make sure it's cash flow focused. I think that's what's critical and makes this conversation okay. If it's not cash flow focused, I think it's a very dangerous game to go start risking your asset, your main asset, your home. I think it's very dangerous to be, negatively geared, buying negatively geared properties, period. But if you're being very mindful about cash flow, I think you're going to be fine.
Arguably, we've arrived at the most important question of the entire show. I need to ask you, Clint Harris.
Yes.
What is your favorite pizza?
Oof. Favorite pizza is margarita.
Margarita.
Yeah.
Simple. I like it.
Influence from my wife. She's from New Jersey.
Yep.
And they do it well over there. There is a place on the Central Coast I like to go get it.
Where I love giving a good place a shout out. Where is it?
Rhonda's, Terrigal. Yeah.
Rhonda's.
Yeah. So, we go there a bit. It's a fantastic place to go get a pizza.
You ever making it at home? Like, is your wife like into making that kind of stuff? Or?
I do more cooking than my wife around the household, but she loves to eat too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Clint, look, you've got nothing short of an incredible story, mate. And I appreciate you taking the time out to fly over here to share it with our whole audience. Is there any final words of wisdom or anything you'd like to leave everyone with today, mate?
Take action, have some fun, dream big too. I think there's too many people that are always shaving down their goals. And I think that's comes from a place of fear of failure. It's all good. Like, let's go. Just stretch it, go for it, do it carefully, but dream big.
Dangerous things safely.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There you go.
Love it. Clint Harris, thank you so much for jumping on the show, mate.
Thank you.